Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is 12 on the dot, and I'm just going to provide a minute or two here for folks to join. We've got a large group of folks registered for this event, so just wanted to make sure we have just a little bit of slush. But thank you so much for joining us. Okay, great. And for those of you that are logging on, we're just waiting one more minute for folks to allow folks just until 12:02 to be able to join the call. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Andrea Calderon. I am the current board president for the Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition. And we've got our great board on the call as well. Past president, who I am so dearly thankful for, Anita Cordova, Vice President Miriam Hicks, Lori Frappier, Renia Ehrenfoyt, and Cristina Parajon, as well as Brittany Espinoza, who will be joining us, who is working with the coalition. And Senator O'Malley, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Great. So we're thrilled to have you all here, and a big welcome to our speakers today. The Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition definitely could not do the work without you and your membership. So if you haven't done so already, we really encourage everyone to please consider joining as a full member. More information on that can be found at our website at www.albuquerqueaffordablehousingcoalition.org. Just as a quick prep. And it looks like we have a lot of folks sort of pouring in and some more representatives joining us. I just wanted to welcome Representative Cates and Anya Nornu. We are also, we've got some committee meetings going on today. As you all know, a lot of them have already started, have been going on for quite a while. And so we will be, as folks are able to join to make their statements, they will be dropping in, and we'll be sort of shuffling a little bit as folks have availability. We had a couple of representatives indicate that they had about half-hour windows to join. And so with as little interruption as possible, we will try to transition smoothly to their points. And so I know that Representative Parajon was in a hearing just before this meeting, which she was hoping would be wrapped up by the time that we started today. But since I'm not seeing her on the call, I just wanted to go ahead and start since we've got a pretty tight timeline. I again, thank you for everyone that's joined us. And I just wanted to pass on and welcome Representative Rubio. A pleasure to have you, and Representative Romero. Thank you for joining us. We are just launching into our talk, and I actually wanted to go ahead and pass it on to you all to go ahead and introduce yourselves. I'm going to go ahead and start just at the beginning of my screen, no particular order. I've actually got Representative Anya Nornu at the top of my screen. And then if folks could pass it on to the other representative as they see fit at the end of their intro, that would be fabulous. All right, I will pass it on to you, Representative.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea, kind of for taking over as host while Rep. Parajon is in her hearing. Hi, everybody. I'm Representative Janelle Yanornu. I apologize for being off camera. I'm having ongoing technical issues with my laptop camera. If you've been in a Zoom with me in the last several months, you were familiar with it. I represent House District 19. That's in the International District of Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the Fairgrounds area. And we are really excited for the upcoming 60-day session. We have clear goals in mind. Housing is, for me, housing is my first, second, and third priorities in the international district. We have to really get serious about addressing it. Of course, there is an absolute shortage of actual available housing on the market, and that is something that we intend to address in the 60-day. But there are other also kind of creative ways, creative approaches that we can take to addressing the housing crisis. Really small changes that will have a huge impact. To that end, I will be carrying a bill in the 60-day session that is a credit worthiness assistance program. What we see time and time again, especially cases of single mothers, is that they're being denied the opportunity to rent a house or rent an apartment, even though they meet every qualification, because they have a bad credit score for something that occurred, 10, 15 years ago in their early 20s. They're still feeling the impacts of that when they go to apply for an apartment, even though they meet every other qualification. So this bill would really give the property managers kind of a safety net that if something should occur when they rent to that young mother or that person with a bad credit score, that if something should occur in that first year of their lease, that we will cover the remainder of that lease in their first year. So that way property managers and landlords don't have to feel nervous about renting to someone who qualifies for that apartment or house in every other way apart from that bad credit score. We've also been talking about doing bills around eviction expungement, because that is another huge barrier that people are facing for things that happened very early on in life when they first became renters, that's still impacting them decades later sometimes. So I'm very excited about these bills. They have had kind of little test runs in houses and in committee, and they've been received very well. So I'm really excited to run those. And that is it for me. I will go ahead and pass on to the rep that I see next, which is um, Rep Kathleen Cates.
Uh, Thank you, Representative. I'm Representative Kathleen Cates from District 44. District 44 is all of Corrales, parts of Rio Rancho, and in Albuquerque in the unincorporated area of Alameda. So I'm north of Alameda and Paseo del Norte, from the river down to I-25. Um, I'm currently paying my bills as a licensed realtor and have been for several years now. But I have 20 years of experience of being executives for non-for-profits, and some of that was also supportive housing. All of it was for individuals with disabilities, but I have some supportive housing background as well. I'll be carrying 3 bills for the upcoming session that relate to housing, and one has already been pre-filed. It's House Bill 43. It will address the income screening issues that we're having. It uh, only allows the rent above the voucher to be used in any kind of landlord mandated income screening. So such as your rent is 1,100, but your voucher is 950, and the landlord requires 3 times income verification of the rent. They can only do the $150 above the voucher as part of their calculation. So you would have to show $450 worth of income. And then we also clearly lay out that a list of acceptable income sources. So car dealerships, credit cards, they all accept uh, child support and alimony and annuities and other things as a source of income. A lot of landlords were saying they don't because they're not consistent. So if they are requiring like 3 months of bank statements and they can show consistent deposits, that they need to accept what all other licensed lenders will accept. I have 2 other bills. I don't know if this is the time you want me to go into them, or am I supposed to just end it there?
Mm, We wanted the focus to be specifically housing related or any housing adjacent specific bills, but also to speak to how the bills that you're working on, that you're prioritizing the session might add to a future sort of like an overall vision that you have for housing in New Mexico, if any. And I know that can get really long, and our visions can, yeah.
So I have housing bills besides House Bill 43. House Bill 43 will be also sponsored by Representative Perron. I have two other House bills that I have not pre-filed yet. I tend to focus on entry level home ownership. You have more rights as a homeowner than you do as a renter, and it's a key to building any kind of economic or fiscal stability. As we all know, we're most of the population is one paycheck away from financial collapse, and so in home ownership you have much more leeway. I say you get a demand notice at 3 days for a rent, but you have like 15 days to pay your mortgage payment, and then many months after that before the bank starts to intervene. So you have many more. So one of my bills is called an owner occupancy bill. I have issues with properties that are like condo, townhouses, patio homes. They have shared walls, floors, shared assets. So they're run by HOAs. These are perfect entry level housing because they can be from 80,000 to like $150,000 units, even 3 bedroom, 2 baths. They're deeded differently than a single family home. And so they have different requirements. And currently, the federal government and then therefore other conventional reputable lenders will not loan and will not do federally backed loans like FHA and VA loans, which are low payment down, low interest, or no payment down, which is where your fixed income and entry level people would be using. They can't access those loans because those condominiums have over 50% rentals. They're being owned by out of state investors and then rented, and the HO has left them. Once they go under 50% owner occupancy, they're no longer eligible for a federally backed loan. And I'd like to change that. And so we're working. Any minute now, I'll be able to file that owner occupancy bill. Another bill I have is less housing and more of it is housing related, but it's a recruitment retainment bill for medical providers, which is a housing incentives. And yes, I have been a big advocate in trying to reach out with constituents on housing issues directly related with property managers and landlords as well, to make sure that uh, that we're being able to provide for the housing. I agree with Representative Anya Nornu, and I'm sure I'm going to agree with all the electeds on here. We all work together as a group. I will tell you that the Speaker of the House is making this a big priority and has held space all year long for Ruby, for all of us to be able to come and discuss our bills and to work as a group so that we can fill all those different gaps. And I feel confidence that he will prioritize space for us on the floor if we get them through committee. So thank you. And let's hear from Representative Romero.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Representative Andrea Romero. I'm from Northern Santa Fe County, where we represent from the city of Santa Fe through the Pojoaque Valley into the city of Espanola. We have 4 sovereign pueblos, Tesuque, Pojoaque, Nambe, and San Ildefonso. Coming from our perspective in our community, housing is a human right. So when we talk about all of these different issues that we'll be working on, housing stability, understanding that housing is a different type of asset, it's a different type of right that we want to assert in the state of New Mexico. All of those values sort of come together in some of the bills that I'll be working on this session, with all these fine, amazing people on this call as well. And I should say that many of us have been convening throughout the 2024 to talk about these issues and really coalesce around a number of different issues that I think Rubio popped in the chat. So we'll add a little bit of texture to that. So that's where I'm coming from on these ones. And I think one that big picture issue that Rep. Cates, myself, Chairwoman Chandler, and a number of senators are going to be working on is the anti-donation clause, which I think affects a number of folks here, and should know too that we've been working with a number of different departments to be sure that when we're looking at repealing and replacing anti-donation clause, and I'm happy to unpack that, it affects affordable housing because it has been an exception in our Constitution to be able to fund affordable housing despite the anti-donation clause, but we've been having to jump through a number of hoops and go over a number of hurdles in order to do that. So we'll help clarify those things through the support of repealing and replacing our anti-donation clause and the supporting legislation for that. In addition to that legislation, I'll be working on sealing eviction records. Representative Anya Nornu talked about that. I'll be working with Senator Hamlin on limiting and eliminating superfluous fines and junk fees for renters. And I'll have a standalone bill on the ban of AI use for price fixing rents. There are a number of websites out there that are currently being used to, unfortunately, sort of manipulate in an antitrust way, where landlords are no longer competing, but AI is using a way to generate rent prices, and we've seen this increase since the pandemic. And so would love to talk about that in session, and happy to answer any questions about that as well. So all of that to say, I'm going to be supporting a number of other issues, but those are the pieces of legislation that I'll be working on first and foremost in the realm of housing, and then of course just big picture, hoping to increase the supply of housing across the spectrum, but also lend support to the funding that's needed for everything from linkages to support for the unhoused across the board. So thanks for everybody joining, and look forward to seeing you at the Roundhouse. I will pass it to Rep. Rubio.
Thanks, Rep. Hi, everyone. I'm Angelica. I represent District 35 here in the city of Las Cruces. And I'm sorry, my face just came on Zoom and it just like really caught me off guard. So now I'm like feeling very self-conscious about that. But I just want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to be here. As everyone has mentioned already, we have been working as a cohort in the House of Representatives for most of the year, trying to tackle a lot of the issues that we all are experiencing within our own districts. And I think that a lot of these efforts that we are introducing in the session in a couple weeks are straight from many of you all, who you all have been really diligent about supporting us in the role of advocacy and the work that you're doing on the ground. And so I just want to thank you all for that. I mean, I just want to say that a lot of this effort started for us in 2021, addressing the pandemic, the issues that were heightened because of the pandemic, and we've just not seen any real like downturn. I mean, there's so many of our communities who are still facing so much of this impact. And I think one of the things that Representative Romero mentioned is just how, for me, this issue is a human right. I mean, even just here in Cruces right now, we're struggling. We have the weather is really cold, and it's really hard to just see so many people who are unhoused not having shelter during this time. And so it's something that is a constant reminder for me. And so I know that we're tackling a lot of these issues in a piecemeal kind of way, as I put out the list of a lot of the legislation that we're introducing. I'm definitely supporting, either as a main sponsor or supporting the rest of the cohort of legislators hoping to get a lot of these measures through the finish line, across the finish line. As someone mentioned, I think it was Representative Cates, the speaker, has prioritized this issue, and so we're hoping that we get a lot of this, a lot of these efforts across. And so I urge you all to just any support that you all could provide us during the session, talking to your other legislators, talking to constituents, if there are folks who can call in for public comment, things like that. That would be really, really important. And so anything that we can be in support of as well, I mean, I'm happy to do my part. And so I don't know, I don't know who else is on. I think that might be it right now for the other legislators, unless I haven't seen anybody else come through. But Andrea, I can hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Representative Rubio. I think we have Representative O'Malley left, so I'll go ahead and pass it on to you.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. So I'll just jump right into it. Just a little my background, before I was elected to the Senate, and this would be Senate District 13. It encompasses part of the North Valley, and it has the historic neighborhoods within it, Barelas and San Jose, and parts of downtown, so older neighborhoods, but also includes the semi-rural areas of the North Valley. So prior to being elected, I served 3 terms on the City Council, Albuquerque City Council, and Bernalillo County Commission. So prior to running for office, and this is mostly about my background, I was a neighborhood activist and I was an organizer, and we were fighting a polluter in my community with my fellow neighbors, and this activism and basically volunteerism ended up led our efforts to success in redeveloping the Sawmill Yards, which is now known as the Sawmill District. So I've always been a real strong advocate for affordable housing. I was the founder and Sawmill Community Land Trust first director, and this is a 33-acre development that is just east of the Sawmill Market. All of the housing on this project is affordable, and it's permanently affordable. So there's over 90 single-family houses on this trust, over 200 units of affordable rental housing, and there's more to come. And as a matter of fact, we're working on a project now and supporting them to do a master plan to include housing, and we hope to do some cooperative housing there, a multi-generation cooperative housing. So I'm excited about that. So I was also the sponsor of the city's Albuquerque Affordable Housing Trust, and this has created millions of dollars that go to housing in Albuquerque. So, largely because of my experience in building affordable housing, I do know what's needed to get projects off the ground. Right now, we struggle with getting the necessary, what we call gap financing as part of the capital stack to get projects off the ground that are already in the pipeline. And most of course, which are, in this area, the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. So the city and the county decided to get together last year and create what's called the Middle Rio Grande Housing Collaborative. And it's an advocacy group. At this point, it's not an authority. I think they plan to make it into an authority. And it's prioritized projects throughout the county. These are all affordable housing projects. And so the legislators, if you haven't already received something from them, I know that they're going to give a list to both to the legislators and also the governor. And they're also asking for set-aside funding, and that is for projects to go to the agencies directly from the state, so that they can have a share, they can have a guaranteed share of funding. These are, housing projects take 7 or 8 types of funding to get things done. So that's called the capital stack, and because they're just expensive, cost of building housing has doubled. So I'm really interested in taking a hard look at the obstacles regarding funding, affordable housing, and how do we make things happen and make them quickly, because when you're doing housing or you're actually doing development, time is money. So I'm also very supportive of transitional housing to address homelessness. I did lead the effort to get projects off the ground. That's the Tiny Home Village and the one that's being built now, the Pallet Shelter for Recovery Center. But we do need more, and I read recently that there was a project that was probably going to happen in the International District for also another transitional housing project. So I do want to speak because I know some members spoke at the meeting at the city council the other night. So I want to address that because I spoke at that meeting as well. I've always been supportive of what's called the housing middle. That includes duplexes, two-story apartments, and townhomes. These did not get passed by the Housing First legislation at the city last year. But unfortunately, I think it's going to be challenged because property owners did not get noticed. I am one of those property owners. I represent people who are property owners in this area, and it's called an upzone. So unfortunately, because of the lack of process and some of the legislation that has a wording to disenfranchise community members, I think that this legislation is going to be challenged. It's unfortunate because there was a lot of people who signed up to speak in support of it. They mentioned the need for affordable housing. We need more affordable housing, but nowhere in this bill did it talk about affordable housing. So that's unfortunate too. So I guess I just want to say that, also I'm very interested in manufactured housing, the concerns and challenges regarding people who own a mobile home in a manufactured housing designated development. And there's a very, very unique situation, of course, where they own the house and they don't, they rent the land. I think we got to figure out how to help folks there, and I am, part of that discussion as well. So just generally speaking, I just want to say, stable housing is definitely one of, the factors to help, families reach their goals for their children. But of course, there's the health, education, food security, there's other factors. And so these are the things that, these will always be my priorities. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. It's looking like Mr. Warwath, I see you representing the governor's office as a senior housing policy advisor. Welcome. Thank you. I'll go ahead and pass it on to you. I believe we've had all of the representatives on at the moment present, and as folks log on, we'll go ahead and pass it on, Daniel, with as smooth as a transition as possible. I know Representative Barahona is still in that committee meeting, and so hoping that we can have her on after that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Andrea, and thanks for being patient with me. We got caught in a pretty big snowstorm on the way down to Las Cruces. We're here for the groundbreaking of the Amador Crossing project, which is a supportive housing project being led by the city of Las Cruces. The groundbreakings today, so we're down here for that. I'm actually coming to you from the Mesilla Valley Community of Hope, if you're familiar with that campus in Las Cruces. So yeah, excited to be here. Sorry that I missed the beginning of the meeting and other presentations. I hope I can get caught up at some point on what some of those discussions were. Wanted to talk a little bit about the agenda we're working on for the legislative session. I think just start with funding and the governor's executive budget request. She asked for $102 million for housing. For special initiatives, 50 million of that for statewide homeless initiatives. And so that'd be funding used to supplement our existing roughly $18 million in federal housing funding for homeless issues. And that's a mix of, I think, both capital facilities and programmatic money that would be managed by our office. We did actually just this week have new staff person who's leading our work around homelessness. Her name's Taylor Cook. She's the director of homeless initiatives for our Office of Housing, and she is coming to us by way of Austin, where she worked for the city of Austin for years on homelessness issues. And after that, she just wrapped up actually a PhD program at UT Austin. She also served on the Balance of State COC board in Texas. So bringing some really specialized expertise to our team is going to lead the work on both allocating the existing discretionary funding that the governor has, which is just shy of $20 million for statewide homeless initiatives. And so we're asking for another $50 million. And that's based on roughly about the amount of just informal proposals we got for the governor's 20 million that she has this year. We got a little in excess of about $50 million in requests, and that's where we came up with that number. The other request is one that's being driven sort of by more by me and what I'm seeing a need for, which is a request for $50 million for home ownership development focused on first-time home buyers. I think one of the things that feel like we're not seeing enough movement on is entry-level home ownership for low and moderate income households in New Mexico right now. We have a lot of folks that in the rental spectrum are a little higher income, who are sort of caught in the rental market because of the increase in interest rates and home prices over the last few years. And so we want to put a big push of $50 million into, if folks are familiar years ago with MFA's program that they used home funds for home ownership development. It's a front-end subsidy that is used to help construct a unit, and then it converts to down payment assistance. So really trying to deal with a supply side issue of home ownership availability right now, and something that I think would be beneficial for both nonprofit development partners, for-profit builders who are building entry-level housing to help make those homes affordable to folks that right now aren't accessing home ownership, and hopefully free up some naturally affordable rental housing stock in the process. There's also in that executive budget request, a $2 million request for continued funding for our office. We had a $2 million allocation in last year's budget, and we've asked for another $2 million. We're up to a staff of 4 working on housing. We've got a couple folks working on housing and on homelessness specifically. And then myself and one other person who works on right now data, which is one of our really big focuses. The other priority and our number one priority is Office of Housing, creating a statutory Office of Housing at the state. As most folks know, the state does not have an internal housing entity or department. And obviously we have the Mortgage Finance Authority, who does an excellent job at our project-based subsidy and managing our affordable housing funding programs. What we're really working on is focused on, I would say, 4 really big areas. The first is data, and sort of the lack of really good data and goal setting in New Mexico around housing. And so we want to work to create sort of a data dashboard that is the starting point for us to be able to measure progress against our housing goals, start to move away from our maybe vibes-based approach to housing to a more data outcome model. One of the big roles that we're already doing a ton of is internal coordination at the state. So folks who work in the homelessness space know that, you probably interact with maybe 6 or 7 different state agencies when you're trying to assist someone to rehouse them. And so one of the big roles that we're serving is sort of coordinating across state agencies to get better outcomes from our existing programs and resources in housing or housing adjacent activities, and also providing technical assistance to state agencies as they undertake housing activities to make sure that those programs are designed well and in ways that are impactful and work for both the partners who implement those programs and folks that benefit from them. Another big area is work on housing systems, right? And so folks that work in the development fields know that housing construction costs have gone up really markedly in the last couple of years. Our subsidy dollars are not going far. We're needing more subsidy for every unit. And as a result, we've seen over a 50% decrease in the number of, say, 9% affordable housing tax credit units in the last 3 years, 4 years. And so we're really focused on working on the systems level stuff of housing. So thinking about everything from labor and workforce to supply chains to regulatory frameworks and building codes, working on that bigger picture stuff that hopefully will benefit everyone, whether it's an entry-level market rate home or someone trying to construct a facility for unhoused populations. It's something that will benefit everybody and hopefully start to turn the tide and really work on this overall housing shortage we have in the state, which is somewhere between 35 and 40,000 units that we need to construct right now to meet demand. And then another big role that we see the office having, and this is essentially what's called out in the legislation, and I actually just got the final version of the draft bill approved yesterday, so I'll be able to share that with folks as folks need, and we'll be doing info sessions on this with different constituent groups over the next couple of weeks to just socialize the policy. But really working with local governments. So like the challenge we face is like, we know we need to build a lot of housing units, tens of thousands of housing units in our urban cores of the city of New Mexico. But a lot of that stuff really comes down to things like local land use and zoning, local capacity, local ability to approve housing. And so we really want to develop out our capacity to work with local governments to do better at housing and even create regional strategies for some of our more rural areas. I've spent the last year connecting with something like close to 40 towns, counties, cities, tribes around housing, and sort of have surveyed the range of needs. And they're really diverse, but we need to have something in place that's working with local governments and regional entities like COGS and housing authorities to increase our housing capacity, particularly in rural areas where you can't stand up, say, a standalone program in a relatively small town. So that's a big piece of it, being able to work with local governments and help grow our capacity for housing. And then the last bill that is still in drafting, so I don't have a lot of specifics to offer right now, is looking at expanding the applicability of the affordable housing tax credit in New Mexico. Those of you that have worked with this is an existing program that provides a charitable provides a 50 cent on the dollar state tax credit for contributions to affordable housing. It's generally underutilized and sort of hard to use and can't do things like land banking and a lot of other things that we see a lot of benefit from. And so we're working on a bill to introduce that would expand the use of the affordable housing tax credit and the eligible activities under that tax credit to hopefully get it more utilized and leveraged more. So those are that's the 10,000 foot view of what we're working on. There's a couple more legislative things that I've pitched. I'm not sure if they'll get greenlit. There's a lot of legislation coming forward this session and not a lot of bandwidth. So we'll see, but I'm working really hard to start to daylight this stuff, and we'll work really hard to create opportunities for folks to learn about this stuff, get involved. And happy to answer questions that folks may have. I know there's some in the chat, but I haven't been able to keep up when I'm talking.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I so appreciate all of you all sharing that and your priority areas for this upcoming session. We do have 4 questions now that have come up in the chat. And Representative Romero, since you're still here on screen, and others, please feel free to respond as well. We have a question around AI, the use of AI for rental screening. Would you be able, and as well as utilities, would you please be able to share a little bit more about that, and if you're able to, sort of some of the obstacles that you're seeing across the state, the impact, and who is really being impacted by the use of that rental, to, if to the extent that that is actually impacting our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I learned about this at a conference I was recently attending, and I'll pop the organization that brought it to my attention in the chat once I track them down. So essentially, this has been like a post-pandemic sort of, I guess, situation that's been happening. There are websites that landlords can just simply like Google, essentially asking like, what price should I be in my rent at? And these AI companies are basically, unfortunately, getting landlords to work together to price their properties similarly, and or continue to eliminate the availability of properties generally in order to be able to maximize prices and rental prices. So it's sort of an antitrust situation where they're no longer competitive. They're kind of working together to essentially price these things competitively and then fix price in order to raise prices. So This had been a phenomenon that this organization had discovered, and I got really interested in trying to figure it out. There's a bill that was worked on in New Jersey that I will be looking at modeling after. And so lots of information there, and I can throw all of these links in the chat about this as soon as I'm just looking for an email about this. So the organization is called, 1 second, Economic Liberties, and I will throw the link to that organization in the chat and any information. But yeah, happy to chat to anybody about what I've learned about it, if there's any follow-up questions.
Winter, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Representative Romero, thank you for that. Does this capture, do you know if this captures the software, like RealPage?
So yeah, so I've learned about RealPage. So essentially, yes, it captures what they're doing. It also disallows that from being used essentially in New Mexico whatsoever. And so it's an all-out ban for those type of algorithms, and essentially we're asking them to let us know what that algorithm is. This has been used in California as well. I just put the white paper in that they're talking about with what the White House has done. And so yeah, I'm trying to get my hands around what this really is. But the New Jersey legislature unfortunately passed a watered down version of what I'm going to put in the chat. But we're going to try and look at this as an opportunity for us to kind of get the strongest piece of legislation available as to what New Jersey started with.
Great, thank you. And then because the United States Department of Justice, they filed suit against RealPage too. So I don't know if I'm not, I think in DC, I'm not sure what the jurisdiction is, but I'm sure there's some facts in there that you can utilize if you didn't know about that. But
Cool.
I'm also, I don't know if they're gonna keep, if they'll drop that case now when the administration changes.
Oh, good point. Yeah, well, we should follow up. This has been a new piece of information for me, and trying to, meet the demand of learning before session. But certainly did not know how systemic it was, and the fact that it is in New Mexico is pretty troubling. So yeah, would love to follow up with anybody interested.
Yeah, so count me in. So FTC, CFPB, and there's another one I know are involved also at the federal.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll have a look. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you so much. We're seeing another question in the chat about bills that are specific for lower income professionals. And I'm seeing the keyword as professionals here, including first responders, teachers, EMT, paramedics, etc., with regards to home ownership. So this is related to wealth building efforts rather than addressing renters or renter protections. Yeah, and I just want to go ahead and put that out for the representatives for any responses.
Well, my owner occupancy bill is to free up future and existing housing in that entry level, exactly in that occupational group. Exactly, it's out there. But the way it's deeded prevents them from being able to use what they need to use, the federally backed loans, and so I'm looking into more of that. Now, obviously, we also need to continue to build, but if we continue to build the condominiums and townhouses, as the senator talked about in last night's Albuquerque City Council, it doesn't matter if they're all going to be bought up by investors and then rent them. It won't resolve the entry level housing that we need to resolve unless we can make it available for federally backed loans. I'm sorry, but I have to go to my next one, but
Okay.
I know that we did give
I wish I could have heard Representative Peron, but I know I'll talk to her soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Representative Cates. And thank you for that answer as well. Alrighty, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next question since it seems like that is a specific bill addressing and thoughts around home ownership for this upcoming session. So another question that I'm seeing in the chat is, could you please share your thoughts about any anticipated committee pathways for these efforts? Which committees might be barriers to passage, and where can we engage to support your efforts? And I really appreciate this question as it speaks to our audience of advocates who are really looking to be engaged with this upcoming session.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I put a little response in the chat. This is Rip Romero, just about the fact that we have such a new body of legislators coming in, especially in the Senate, and every single 60-day session, we all get sworn in again, and we all get assigned our committees. So we won't know who gets what committee. We won't know the makeup of who's serving where until really day one of the legislature. So we're all going in this a little bit with a lot of unknowns. And then of course the speaker on our House side, and of course on the Senate side, they get assigned different committees once they're read into I'm like, what are they being read into? Read into the legislative process. We'll call it that. So it has to be read twice and all of the pomp and circumstance, and then they get assigned. Sometimes we get to have an opportunity to talk to our speaker about where we would like the bills to go, but unfortunately, that's not always how it works out, right? So we'll certainly have a better update for everybody as soon as these bills are assigned and read in, but that could take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for all of these bills to get read. So just everyone, please be patient with the crazy process that we will be coming into, and also just learning who's on what committee and what the pathways will be. So there's gonna be a pretty interesting sort of slow but fast process in the first couple of weeks of session.
Okay, I'm going to pass it to Rep. Anyanornu. We are wondering if there's any particular support that we can provide as advocates with regards to how these bills are moving through committees.
Yes, so just to kind of add on to what Rep. Romero said about the craziness of the process, if you pay really close attention to NMLegis, our nmlegis.gov website, where it's literally the Bible. It'll tell you where every bill has been assigned. It won't tell you when the committee hearings are, and often we as legislators, Rep. Romero can attest to this, we don't know when our hearings are. You're very lucky if you get 48 hours notice. I mean, it's never going to be more than that, unfortunately. But as advocates, the best way that you can support is to track those bills that you really care about and show up. I'm putting that in air quotes that you can't see what I'm doing with my fingers, but show up to committee meetings for the bills that you support and give public comment if you can. If you're able to sign up for public comment in person, that's wonderful. I know that's really hard to do because a lot of times these hearings are happening on a Wednesday at 1:30, and that's just not going to be something that everybody's able to do. But many committees offer public comment via Zoom. So if you're able to sign up, or even if you could just send an email of support about the bill to the members of the committees where it's been assigned, to the chair of that committee, that it would really mean a lot to you to see that this particular bill got a hearing, you see it's been assigned to this particular committee and you would love to see it get a hearing. That's also extremely helpful. But I know it's hard to keep track of because yeah, the schedule is just absolutely insane, but that's one way that is really helpful.
Great, thank you. And I know there have been some efforts out there to do some legislative tracking among advocates, but it does seem to be an obstacle. I just wanted to share for those that have organizations with a little bit larger of you know, a revenue stream or access to funding, that there is sort of Roadrunner Capital Reports, which offers that service of legislative tracking as well as notification when committee meetings are going to be starting, considering that those move around quite a bit. I called them and it seems like they have a flat fee of about $3,500 a year for an organization, which they also track interim. If there are any others that are doing legislative tracking, since many of us are as a part of organizations that have pretty restrictive budgets, and are willing to share their efforts, that would be really incredible. I know all of us are really trying to keep track of a fast moving landscape. So I just wanted to sort of move on to the next question, and thank you. Oh, actually, Daniel, I'm sorry. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond, and Nornu, thank you so much for your response. So appreciate it as well. But Daniel, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a tricky game to sort of stay on top of the legislative process, and it can pop up really quick. I think, you know, we're always trying to think about ways to do updates without sort of spamming people and on where they should be. And you know, as the representatives have said, we don't really know the committee makeup or the path that bills will take yet. I think our plan from the governor's office is to probably hold at least a weekly just information session where we can talk about the different stuff we're working on, where it's at, where people can be useful, things like that. I'll hopefully get that information out to folks soon. I'll certainly share it with you if you want to distribute that to the group once we get it scheduled. But just waiting for some other sort of regular cadence meetings to get firmed up before we schedule that, because we do have, at least in the governor's office, you know, multiple weekly huddles in different subject matter areas and things like that. So open from our point of view to just be, you know, trying to get the word out about where we're at. Also working on standing up a website and some other things that'll be helpful for people to get information in a relatively, hopefully more straightforward way. But also open to entertaining other ideas about how we can keep people in the loop. I know that there has been some talk of, you know, at least internally for legislators, housing caucus meetings during the legislative session, and some other things, and creating report outs from those might be helpful for, you know, members of the public who want to get engaged. But we're always happy at least in the governor's office, to help organize and inform folks who want to get engaged around housing issues that are moving through the legislature, and we'll certainly be tracking everything housing related as it moves through.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And I'm sorry, Winter, did you have your hand up about any of those questions again, or is that from the previous question you had before? Okay, I'll go ahead and pass it off. Oh, it's from the previous question.
No, I just wanted to say on the legislative updates, so for the past couple of years, I've done that every morning, sort of on the housing issues. And so I plan to do that again for this legislative session. But I am going to ask for a little, we're going to ask NMEPD to ask for a little donation. I haven't figured out exactly how much that would be for folks who would like to sign up for that.
Thank you, Winter. So appreciate that. And if you wouldn't mind dropping some of that into the chat, that would be really great as well, to allow an opportunity for folks to respond. Okay, so if we didn't have any more questions or comments related to those particular statements, and please feel free to just raise your hand if a question comes up as I'm moving on, or drop it into the chat. I'm seeing a question around from Charla. Does anyone know if we'll see an introduction of a bill to create protections or insurance for property owners willing to rent to higher risk tenants? It was brought up by Representative Anya Nornu at last session. So I will leave that up for discussion for Representative Romero and Daniel, who are left on the call, but also anybody else who would be interested in hopping in. Please feel free to raise your hand to do so.
I don't know. I actually don't know the answers to that question.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of anything. We're working on rolling out a sort of update to our statewide landlord support program for folks that take vouchers. We've got a draft contract with the Mortgage Finance Authority to get that up and running, and then we're looking at a secondary piece of that program that would work through regional housing authorities. So we have sort of a programmatic and funding-based approach to that, but nothing statutory or new in this legislative session. It's a 2-year appropriation. We're asking for reauthorization to carry that over. So that is something that we're running through DFA, and then MFA is going to be doing implementation. And that does stuff like signing bonuses for people who accept vouchers. We're looking to expand them to include, basic repairs to get something up to meet standards for accepting federal vouchers, and also providing some additional financial support beyond the security deposit in the case that a unit is damaged. So that should fairly soon finalize the.
Okay, and Daniel, you broke up for us a little bit there at the end. So if you, wouldn't mind repeating those last 2 sentences, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'll try and turn. I have a weak signal here, so I'll turn off my my video. But yeah, I'd expect the contract to get finalized in the next month or so with MFA to roll that program out. So, and one of the things that we've been trying to do is originally it was everywhere but Bernalillo County because of the existing programs. I think we may look at doing some stuff within City of Albuquerque, particularly for federal vouchers, because the voucher rental support program there is just for city vouchers. So there'll be, so there's still some tweaks to the final program design that are happening and in contract negotiations with MFA, but I'm happy to get information out to the group on that once it does launch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Charlotte, I see your hand up. Is it related to this particular question or? Okay, great. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I got to texting with her. She said she is going to be bringing it. And just so that people can be on the lookout, it's not. So thank you, Daniel. I'm glad to hear that the efforts for the voucher holders is still moving forward. Her particular bill didn't get very much attention last session, but it was essentially a credit worthiness bill, and it helped folks that had lower credit scores to get into housing. It helped the landlords to have sort of an insurance policy. It wasn't nearly enough money, and so I'm sorry that she had to drop off. I'll get with her and get back with you if you're interested, but I think we have a sort of a problem with folks with low credit scores being able to find housing, as you very well know, Andrea. So yeah, so I'll be interested to see this bill. Hopefully it has more money, and I'll keep you updated. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charlotte. So appreciate that. Renya, I'm also seeing your hand up. Pass it off to you.
And yes, and this is Daniel, and there are 2 comments in the chat, and I will paraphrase one and turn it into a question. One is about capital outlay that is not gap funding for projects. And then the second one is about LIHTC program, and the comment was what an important source of funding this is for existing projects. And you mentioned expanding the the areas on which it can be used, which I absolutely see the value in this, but without more funding, this also means that the projects that already need it and use it, they'll be less available. And kind of any thoughts on continuing to expand the pool to support new development and construction?
Sure. Yeah. Let me go backwards from that. First, I should have been really clear. The state affordable housing tax credit is different than the federal low-income housing tax credit, right? And so we can't change what we do with the federal low-income housing tax credit because that's statutory and is only really available to develop affordable rental housing. Particularly what we're trying to address with the state affordable housing tax credit is one, the way it's structured in terms of you have to apply for a complete project application to be able to access the tax credit. And we want to expand what it's the types of affordable housing activities that are eligible and make it easier to do something like right now, for instance, if you were setting up, say, a land bank for affordable housing, unless someone donates an individual house to you, you would have to do a full project application to MFA with all your sources and everything else included in that to be able to process that tax credit. We'd like to see it be a little more flexible where you could have something put into, say, a land bank for future affordable housing use and be able to give people that tax benefit and then have some sort of restriction on that property until it fulfills its mission and purpose for benefiting lower income folks. So this wouldn't really impact existing programs. And just for context, the cap on those state affordable housing tax credits, which apply towards gross receipts tax, PIT, income tax, things like that, is highly underutilized compared to CAP. I think we deploy about $500,000 a year of tax credits. So this wouldn't really impact anything. It's actually trying to make sure that we actually use a source that we have right now is not getting used up in totality. In terms of capital for not just gap funding, I mean, I think this is a bigger conversation we need to have about housing funding in New Mexico. I mean, I think long-term, what I'd like to see is like stable reoccurring funding for housing in New Mexico so we can do long-term planning so that we can do more than just gap funding. I think a good example would be the Amador Crossing project, where I'm here for the groundbreaking in Las Cruces. That's actually a supportive housing project that doesn't have any tax credits in it. And so it's actually pieced together from local general funds, some discretionary funds from the governor's office, some funds from MFA's Innovation Fund. And so this is an example of where what traditionally would be 3 or 4 different gap sources are being put together in slightly larger amounts to get a whole project done. I think we have a huge need in New Mexico to figure out some of the gaps in housing, particularly rental housing. If you're trying to do, say, a project under 50 or 60 units, it's not a good fit for low-income housing tax credits because of the soft costs and sort of some of the other things associated with it. And there's a lot of communities in New Mexico that can't support that size project or don't have the need for that size project. And so really thinking about what we do to help support affordable housing development that meets some of these gap needs is a big piece of sort of the strategic work we'd like to do in the Office of Housing, and also identifying new ways to fund housing like that to get away from just gapping, because we actually need to not just gap existing tax credit projects, we actually need to figure out how to be doing several hundred more affordable rental units and supportive housing rental units here than we are now, sort of being limited by what we can do with the larger tax credit programs from the feds.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that deeper dive into financial instruments and sort of what we have available at the state. I just wanted to take a quick poll and a quick pause for our members and folks on the call, of course, everyone. In some of our recent meetings, we've gotten a little bit more technical about financial instruments and what's available around gap housing. And I'm realizing that there aren't a lot of resources that I'm seeing out there pertaining to sort of explaining those in a way that is a little bit more digestible. And I'm just wondering if if folks could raise their hand if they thought that would be a really great resource for you all, or if it would be helpful for your advocacy efforts. We are just thinking about the resources that we have up on our website and want to make sure that we're meeting members' needs. Thank you. So I just wanted to open up the floor. I'm not sure if I saw any more questions, and the rest of the board, please feel free to jump in if I missed any.
Well, right now there is a hand raised. It's RR46621. So if your hand is raised, I'm not sure who is behind this.
I was just responding to the question. Sorry. The previous question.
Great, thank you. So it seems like most of, oh, I'm sorry, Rania, did you want to say anything? Saw you come off. Okay, great. Because most of the representatives have already hopped off screen, I'm wondering if it would be of best value in using the rest of our time. We've got about it until we have this meeting scheduled until 1:30, and I realize that we're beyond the lunch hour for most folks, and some folks have already been hopping off. But I just wanted to provide an opportunity for those that have already been working on legislative efforts in the field. We have seen some things talked about at the New Mexico Housing Alliance meetings, as well as others. Would love to hear from you about any particular focus areas that you are taking, and if additional support could be useful, or sort of just general information about the campaigning that you're looking to do this session, if you feel comfortable. Okay, and I'm so sorry. I'm actually going to pause myself pause that question, put a pin in that for just 1 minute, because I'm seeing Representative Barahon was able to hop on. Representative Barahon, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. We had some other representatives talk about their legislative priorities, some of which I know you're working in partnership with. Would you mind diving into your housing focus priority areas that pertain to your larger vision around housing in New Mexico? Please talk about if there are ways that the coalition or coalition members might be able to step in to support your efforts at the state.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. And hi, everyone. My name is Cristina Barahon. I'm the representative for House District 25. And I'm really sorry that I was jumping in and out of the meeting. There's a big bill negotiation happening today for alcohol tax. And I'm super excited to bring that because that bill is going to impact a lot of our folks who experience addiction while they are experiencing homelessness. And we want to make sure that we get that right and that we provide the services that folks who are experiencing, these symptoms, that they're able to get the care that they need. So in regards to the specific bills that I'm focusing on this year, the main one will be the Mobile Home Parks Act. And this one came from my time at New Mexico Legal Aid when I was working there as a paralegal and working with the lawyers there and just seeing a lot of the injustices that happen in that act because it's not written well. So for instance, there isn't a right to cure in the Mobile Home Park Act, and legal aid has, found different ways to work around that and negotiate that. But sometimes evictions happen for reasons that really don't make sense. Like on one case that we were on, a man was being evicted because his home was painted 2 different shades of brown. And so there isn't inside the right to cure, the right that the person has to, make whatever the landlord has asked for better, for them to be able to have that opportunity. Inside that act is also, some other technical changes. There's some numbers that are referenced that don't exist in the statute. So, just cleaning it up. And then we are also looking at 2 other pieces for the Mobile Home Park Act. One is opportunity to purchase, and the other is some form of rent stabilization. But we are still in discussion about that and trying to figure out the best way to do that without violating any takings clauses that are in our legal code. So the main partners on that are also, I want to shout out to Center on Law and Poverty because Maria Greco has really helped lead this discussion on this, as well as Joanne, who is part of the Mobile Home Parks folks who have been organizing around this issue. And, really they themselves, I think it's important that our mobile home park folks who are living there, are part of that discussion. Like, what do they want to see? They know their community best. So, I've been really lucky to be part of those meetings Yes, Joanne, you're here. So Joanne to Michelle. And so, yeah, really grateful to just be able to listen and to try to incorporate, what we're doing into the law. So that is my main area of housing, but I also have a bill that will provide more funding for people who are in the process of getting evicted. The eviction funding for legal services for eviction is pretty limited. And it's limited also to folks who are documented. And so, there's a need to expand what it means to be able to access legal services in this state so that everyone is able here to live. Oh, and Maria Grego's here too. Great. And so that everyone in our community is able to live fair and able to live safely. So those are kind of the two areas, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Barahona. And I do like to take these pauses. It's a little bit agonizing for me, but I see, okay, great, some claps. And for folks that are coming up with questions that you'd like to, as you're thinking through this, please, again, feel free to drop them in the chat. But we're really excited to hear that some of those bills are going to be moving forward. And so, or are going to be introduced. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity for my colleague Anita Cordova to hop on to just bring up some questions for the members on the team or on the call.
Thanks to all the representatives in the Senate that has been here speaking with us this morning or this afternoon as it is. I was very excited to hear housing as a human right come up by both Representatives Romero and Rubio. I know that narrative is super important. We have so many amazing bills. I don't know that we've seen this kind of energy, at least collective and collaborative, in the last few sessions. So it's very exciting for us all to be here together, sharing the space, talking about opportunities to advocate, opportunities to support these bills and support our representatives. And so with that, I was thinking, I know in California, they tried to ratify housing as a human right as a state law. Well, this session is well beyond anything like that we're trying to do. What it made me think about is coming together. While we all have various ways of thinking about housing, affordable housing, making housing last and impactful and creating these large devastating gaps in our community. So how do we all come together and make an impact on these folks making these policy decisions over the next 60-day session? I know that from both our most recent elections and other dialogues that we've had, saying housing as a human right is downright what many of us believe in, and definitely this coalition stands for. However, based on Housing Narrative Lab's studies across this country and bipartisan reviews, calling it housing as a basic human need is generating much more interest. With that, I really just want to open it up with a dialogue. I'm wondering, how do we all come together? Not the same talking points. I don't think that's going to be impactful, but how do we come together where we just leave such a lasting impression on this 60-day session where everyone's coming to the table and saying, whatever the challenges, we have to push through and create the circumstances by which housing can be made a priority and affordable for people who need it most. So that's what I was thinking. What do you all think about narrating around some of this, in particular, the difference between housing as a human right, which can somehow it turns some folks off, and housing as a basic need, which is something we all need everywhere all the time across our state? Or any other narrative thoughts?
Okay, well, that is I think a really great question for us all to think about in terms of approaching how we are, going to be showing up at legislative session, and particularly for those that work with people that are experiencing some of the burden of the current conditions and situation in New Mexico. I do encourage everyone to check out the Housing Narrative Lab resources that we have on our website. Again, that's www.affordablehousingcoalition, Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition.org. I'm sorry, I have to throw that in there, but we, oh, and we're seeing some dialogue in the chat. That's so great. Alyssa saying, agreeing with basic human needs. We too often turn off people with our inside language, and there are some really great pointers on our website with those Narrative Lab resources that say exactly that in turn, and talk about how we can be sort of like a little bit more inclusive in the language that we're using and phrase this in new ways. And thank you, Rania, for dropping that in the chat. I did also want to remind folks that this meeting is being recorded. And so if you had a hard time catching everything that any of the representatives or any of the speakers today said, or folks who are asking questions, the recording will be available for your review on our website. I know I often have to go back and listen through recordings in order to, match them with my notes, etc. So I did just looking at the chat, I saw one other question come through, and I think maybe two at this point. And this one is for Representative Barajon, and I'm so sorry if you've hopped off. I'm kind of in a blind spot here with seeing the entire whoever's logged on, but can you talk more about provisions that would assist manufactured housing community members who might want to buy the land that the community is on?
Sorry, I think she might have had to jump off, but I'm happy to follow up on that question if you send me an email, or if you reach out to myself, I'll be sure to put my email in the chat, and I'd be happy to make sure she follows up.
Great, thank you, Jesse. And Jesse, would you mind introducing yourself? I know Christina dropped your information in the chat, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely, no problem. My name is Jesse Rivera. I was born and raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was just hired on to work as the district legislative aide to Christina Barajon. So I look forward to working with you all more on housing and to making a lot of progress this upcoming legislative session. And I'll be sure to put my email here in the chat. It's jessierivera@nmlegis.gov.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. Maria Griego, I'm seeing that you have a response to the question that was asked. Feel free to unmic and hop on.
Hi, can you just repeat the question so I make sure to answer it fully?
The question was about in the manufactured housing community legislation that's going forward. What are the provisions that will help manufactured housing community owners purchase the land that their community's on?
Sure. So there has been a big movement nationwide towards resident-owned communities, and there is an organization called ROC USA. ROC, ROC stands for Resident-Owned Communities, and they help. They've helped residents across the country form basically through every step of the process you might need to buy the property. So they help residents form a cooperative entity, the legal entity needed to purchase the property. They help with financing. They help with training about community management, etc. And so that can already happen in New Mexico, but the problem is that there is no requirement that property owners give advance notice of their intent to sell to residents. So if residents wanted to do something like the program ROC offers, they'd have to know about the owner's intent to sell, and right now there's no requirement. The property owner could just sell right out from under the residence and give them send them a letter after the fact saying, I've sold the property, here's your new property owner. So the bill would require, amongst other things, an advance notice of the owner's intent to sell. It would also require some transparency in the negotiations. So for example, if there are competing offers between the residents and an outside buyer, and the outside buyer has offered cash plus something else like a piece of property, there are required disclosures about the value of that property, what's included, so that the residents can be competitive in their offer. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Thank you.
Great. I want to acknowledge that we had a question in the chat about can we as members of the Housing Coalition testify to members during the session based on our experience in the field and the community needs we assess firsthand? And so appreciate that question. And we do pride ourselves in supporting those and elevating their voices, and particularly that work directly with community and have firsthand experience. We encourage folks to identify as members of the coalition, but please speak on your own experiences or behalf of your own organizations and identify those as you're approaching legislators. We, recognize that it takes a lot of organizing efforts. It takes really, fully developed sort of processes in order for a coalition to be able to approach legislators as a whole. And unfortunately, we're a small organization. We haven't exactly had the opportunity to really step into that space. And so we do ask that, feel free to mention that you've been attending the meetings. If you would like to become an official member, please check out our website in order to do that and commit to a membership. But you're welcome to say that you've been attending these meetings and speak upon your own experience. And again, narrative resources are available on our website if you all need any support with that. Winter, I'm seeing your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, after watching the legislature these last 3 sessions, including this special, yes, all of us talking heads have the information and facts to share, and I encourage you to do so. But the most influential is somebody you've helped, or somebody that's encountering an issue that there is no way to fix. The actual the folks that we serve, and like the legislators just fall over themselves to try and figure out things that can be done when you have a real person who has been unhoused or is about to be evicted, or something like that. So to the extent that, and I know it's so hard because the timing is so weird with our session, but that I plead with you to have folks lined up for that if you can.
Great, thank you, Winter. So appreciate that. So unless I missed, folks, am I missing? I feel like I skipped another question in the chat. Feel free to drop in if you had that and didn't hear your question asked. Here we go. Any efforts to support local land use incentives for affordable housing development? There's been a lot of movement on this in other states. And Carlos, was that question directed towards the leaders that were on the call earlier, or sort of, other groups or advocacy groups that are online?
A little more so, but yeah, just if anyone has been working on that or seeing anything like that. I haven't seen much of that so far. I know there's been some talk about it, but I haven't seen anything. So just want to know if anything like that's going on. Miriam, if it looks like you're talking and you're off mute, but I can't hear you.
I've got
There you
2
go.
mutes, so thanks. I'd like to address that just quickly in that Daniel Warrath's efforts often include incentivizing communities around the state. So hopefully we'll see more of that. And also Senator Debbie O'Malley spoke to an ordinance in the city of Albuquerque that passed this week that she's thinking will probably get some pushback and will be fought because the reaction from the community is that it was rushed. And so I do think that there have been efforts. The efforts have failed to date. And I think as they get more robust, we're going to see a lot of those tensions increase. And I think as an organization, we see the tension between the decisions, and threading that needle is going to be it's going to be hard. And we respect that and defer and kind of fall to the side of people being able to earn a living wage and have a place to live, all people, housing for everyone, everywhere. And, I feel like personally what I witnessed on Monday at the city council meeting here in Albuquerque was a tipping point that had been reached, and it fell towards pro-housing. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this moves forward in the course of this year. And like Anita mentioned, we're seeing a lot more attention. This speaker for the House has made it a priority within our own state legislative session. So stay tuned. I think we haven't seen anything yet.
Thank you.
I will say also to this point, I think, Carlos, I also heard talk, but haven't heard if anything is moving forward. And I think with something that would make multifamily permissive across the state, as long as it's consistent with local zoning district requirements or any stipulations adopted at the local level. I know that there was some discussion about that after the neighborhood defenders talk. Shout out to HomeWise, Mike, and Veronica for that very productive discussion. But yeah, I haven't heard if we're going to see it, but I think it's something worth continuing to raise as a potential vision for reducing barriers to multifamily housing.
I also wanted to add that, at this past city council meeting, we saw such a great variety of speakers. We saw over 100 folks step up to the plate, about actually closer to 170 people register for public comment this past meeting to address 061 and 69. And I don't, what I really appreciated and what, as a coalition was really great to see was the diversity of voices that came to the table to really discuss, the legislation at hand and the proposed amendments. And something that we are also recognizing is that opportunities for such great public comment as those really both sort of raise a mirror to our community, but create an opportunity for different voices to sometimes step into their corners and separate themselves out. And, I was a little dismayed because I think on multiple sides of the argument, I heard a little, some dehumanizing language, like language that may not have held all of us together as advocates in sort of our pursuit to collectively increase community conditions, right, for residents in Albuquerque and increase housing for all. And what we're really encouraging here is, as we step into a political climate in which we have a very polarized environment in the US, that we continue to have these discussions, that we're ready to come to the table and really hear each other out, that there's an opportunity for collaboration and bridge building across multiple perspectives. And that if we work together, we're really able, we do have the power to move things forward and help better meet the needs of New Mexicans and Burqueños alike. And so Thank you all for joining us. We are at time. I just want to give a big thank you for those of us that have stuck with us till the end. We know it has been a very long meeting, but we do appreciate your extensive participation and listening to our speakers. If you have any other questions right before you leave, feel free to drop them into the chat. And please join us again in March for our next bi-monthly meeting. And again, we would love for those who can to become a member. Thank you.